everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I realize it's been a little while since I've posted anything, and I'd hoped to come back with the making of video, or rather a series of making of videos, which I have already filmed and have 90% edited. But the weather here has been awful and I haven't been able to photograph those costumes, and the videos feel very incomplete without photos or clips of the finished pieces. So those are on hold until the weather holds up, and in the meantime I thought I would post a weekly progress vlog. It'd be better coming back with a vlog because it's a little bit more casual, so I feel like I can explain my absence. I'm going to keep it relatively short, but if you want to skip over it then I will put a timestamp here. The main reason I haven't been posting a lot is because for this year I decided that my #1 priority was going to be making costumes that I was excited about, and I feel like over the last 2 years I haven't been as happy with the projects I've been completing and the quantity of things I've been completing. And a large reason for that is because I've been spending so much time on social media and creating content that lends itself well for social media. So that means taking on simpler projects that are easier to film, or just spending more time editing than I am actually sewing. Videos are so incredibly time consuming to make, especially when you're filming the entire process of making something. I can have 10 or 15 hours of footage to go through, and that takes me maybe 30 hours. It's just such a long process and it wasn't sustainable for me. That being said, I have no intention of stopping making videos. I'm just not going to be pushing myself to get one out on a weekly basis. As I said, I filmed 3 making of videos and they're mostly edited. I also filmed a project vlog and an Etsy haul, and I have plans for a couple more videos, and I already have the materials to film those videos. So I think this 2-month absence is the longest break you're going to see me take from YouTube. I don't want you guys to expect weekly videos anymore because I just don't think that's the best thing for me to be doing. If you do want to see weekly or daily updates from me, then I'd suggest following me on Instagram or WordPress. I'm trying to get back into the whole vlogging thing, and I have been relatively consistent about uploading on Instagram. With that explanation out of the way, I'm going to get into the video. I filmed the course of 10 days, and I worked on an Edwardian striped casual dress, as well as a few projects from the 1820s, one of which is an elaborate velvet court gown, and the other that is a riding costume. I feel like overall I didn't accomplish as much as I'd hoped, but I did manage to complete 2 dresses and make some headway on a work in progress that has been laying around for a long time. So hopefully my productivity will continue in the next couple weeks and I can film some more of it. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video.
Hey everyone, so welcome to this week's progress log. It's been a long time since I've done one of these. This is my first time filming in the new sewing room, and if you haven't heard about this, then I will link a relevant video or blog post, or at the very least my Instagram, where I've been posting little updates. Basically, I switched my sewing room and my bedroom because my bedroom was bigger. The room isn't finished yet. I'm going to have a standing height table and a bunch of things. It's going to be a slow process getting that all together. However, it is currently a functional room, so I'm excited to be getting back to sewing. I visited family for a week, and then the week before that was really getting this room sorted out, so it's nice to be back to it. I currently have an Edwardian striped cotton dress in progress. I came up with this design yesterday morning and quickly draped the pattern, transferred it to paper, made a mock-up, fit the mock-up, and then cut it out of the top layer of fabric. So I'm not quite sure what the next step for this is going to be. I guess sewing the shoulder seam for it and cutting out facings and then sewing the facings in, because I don't think I'm going to fully line it just because I don't want it to be that bulky. So I'll try and keep you posted with that if I choose to work on it today. I also have 2 projects from the 1820s in progress. One is a court gown made out of blue velvet that's covered in gold sequins and embroidery. And then the other is a Renaissance-inspired piece based on a fashion plate from the 1920s. And I've made good progress on the bodice. The bodice is almost completely finished, but I hit a little roadblock with the sleeves and the padded details on them, which is why I haven't been working on this as much currently. I also have this black riding jacket, which is based on something from the 1920s as well, and I think this is going to be my priority for this week in addition to the new costume, just because I've had this in progress for a while and there really isn't that much left to do on it. The jacket is finished aside from a collar, and I have to make a matching hat, and I have to make the skirt. So I guess it isn't close to being finished, but finishing it feels more achievable because I know what those steps are going to look like, whereas with these 2 I'm a little lost. So that's the current plan. I would also like to finish my 17th century orange brocade dress. It's been almost done for 2 months now, and I just need to finish it and then I can photograph it, and that would be great. So those are the current plans, and I will report back to you soon. So I just cut out a facing for the collar, which isn't really facing as much as a base for the lace, because the lace is slightly sheer and I don't want you to be able to see the striped fabric through it. I'm going to be using these two lace trims. This lace isn't quite what I'd envisioned, but I don't have a lot of white lace in my collection, so it's going to have to work, and hopefully it will look good. I'm going to sew them together by hand, then sew them onto this facing, then sew that facing onto the bodice, and hopefully it will all work out well. I do also have another facing over there, which is going to be sewn on afterwards and go around the entire neckline as well as the front of the panel. So I pinned the lace on, and I'm really happy with how it looks. I think it turned out better than I was expecting. I won't know how it works for sure until the closures are on and it's all sewn in place, but I feel like I'm off to a good start. But I'm going to stop working on this for the time being because I can hand sew this in front of the TV later tonight, and instead I'm going to work on draping the skirt for this project as well as the black riding ensemble that I showed you earlier. So I'll show you what that looks like when I'm done. Hopefully it will go well. Skirts for riding costumes are a bit unusual since they were meant to cover the feet when riding side saddle, and I won't be using mine for actual riding, so I'm going to have to try and compromise what's historically accurate with what is wearable for me for photos, yet still looks convincing. So I'm gonna do my best and we'll see what I come up with. So here is the skirt. I don't know what I think about it. I find skirts from the 1820s really difficult to drape because they're not supposed to have a lot of volume to them, but they also have a very specific shape, and that shape isn't straight from the waist down. So the front panel is cut sort of as a triangle, and then the back panel slopes out at the sides and is straight at the back. And yeah, I really don't know how well it's gonna work, but I'm going to try sewing up the side seams and hopefully it will look okay. I left the hem really long because riding skirts are supposed to have long hems, but as you can see it's buckling underneath because there isn't enough volume at the hemline to support the width of this petticoat. So I don't know if I'm going to wear it without the petticoat or just make it so the hem is even with the ground or what, but I'm not very happy with how that looks right now. And the reason I didn't cut the skirt to be wider is because I don't have very much fabric. Hi guys! So it's been 2 days since I last filmed. I'm clearly very out of practice with this whole progress vlogging thing. Yesterday I wasn't feeling that well, and then the day before that was my birthday. And though I was productive on both of those days, I was sort of mopey and not in the best mood and didn't feel compelled to pick up the camera. But I am happy to report that I do have some fabric that came out of that birthday, which is very exciting. And I also got to add this lovely lady and this lovely lady to my Florence ceramic collection, which is ever growing. And I did manage to make quite a bit of progress on the striped Edwardian dress as well. As you can see, it's grown quite a lot in size, and I'll include some progress pictures in this video since I didn't film those elements. I ended up finishing the bodice and then drafting the sleeves and cutting out the sleeves and assembling them and then sewing them onto the bodice. Yesterday I also did a fitting and altered some of the gathering points and the dart size just to make it a little bit more form-fitting and to get rid of some puckering. I had to slightly gather the back of the bodice as well, and then I sewed on the waistband and cut out the skirt and sewed together the skirt and gathered the skirt, and then this morning I sewed it onto the waistband of the bodice. So now all it really needs is to be hemmed, which is what I'm working on now. I've turned the front edge inward by 1/2 inch and then inward once again, and I'm just following the direction of the stripes to keep it looking nice and clean and sewing that down with whip stitches. Then I have to repeat this on the other side, do a quick fitting, and figure out how short I want the hem of the skirt to be. Since this is supposed to be a functional kind of workwear inspired dress, I think it's actually going to be ankle bearing, but I haven't completely decided that yet. So I just finished turning the front edges inward, and now I'm on a search for buttons. This is my bin of buttons along with some other things I've collected. So I'm going to try and find buttons that will work for this, and if I can't find any, I'm going to use 1 inch wide coverable buttons and cover them with either white or a maroon pinkish colored material. So I'm going to have to use coverable buttons because I don't have anything else in the size I want and the quantity that will match this costume. I was originally going to use this dark pinkish maroon colored velvety fabric, and it looks much more pink in person, but I ended up finding this silk that I just got for my birthday, and I'm going to go ahead and use this instead because it really matches very nicely. So I'm going to do that, and then I will have to do a proper fitting with the dress and figure out the hem for it. So I just pinned the hem on the dress form and then used a pencil to mark the guidelines on one side. And then I laid the dress out flat and pinned it at the waistline and the front. Then I trimmed the bottom edge so the hem is the right length on both sides. Now I'm going to go ahead and mark the point where I'm going to turn the hem inward on the other side, because that's only marked on the side I used as a guide. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I just marked the hemline with pencil, which was stupid because that means if I ever want to make the skirt longer, I'll have to use trim or a pin tuck or something to cover that pencil line. I really should have used chalk, but I didn't think of it until I was about halfway through, and by that point it was a little late. So that's unfortunate, but it should be fine because I'm pretty sure the length is perfect. I'm going to go ahead and turn this bottom edge inward by 1 inch, and then I'm going to fold it at the line, which will turn it inward by 2 inches, and the raw edge will be neatly tucked away. Hello everyone! So it's a new day, and I got quite a bit of work done yesterday, but I'm not sure if today is going to be as productive because I got up at 5:30, and it's 9:30 now, and I already feel like I'm ready to go to bed. And I had some adventures this morning because the dogs smelled awful when they came inside. So I got to hunt for dead things in the woods behind our house and then give them both baths. And I'm watching both dogs today since my mom will be out this week, and I'm really just not sure how much I'm going to get done. But yesterday was pretty productive, and I would love for today to be productive as well. If I could finish this dress and then design and draft a hat to go with it, that would be absolutely awesome. So let's hope for that. About the progress yesterday, I lined the waistband and I also sewed hooks onto one side, but I haven't sewn the bars onto this side. The closures for the top of the dress are in place. There are 2 hooks there, and then another hook there, and then 2 snaps. And I also hemmed the skirt. This fabric ironed so beautifully that I didn't even have to baste the edge inward before hemming. I could just iron and then pin it. So I'm really happy with how that went. And I did do a slight fitting just to find the placement for the snaps on the top of the bodice, and I was pretty happy with how that looks as well. So I'm going to do another fitting now and hopefully mark the rest of the closure points, and then I can get this dress finished, which would be fantastic. And something I didn't mention is that I sewed on 3 of the buttons and covered the rest. If I recall correctly, these are the 7/8 of an inch, or maybe they're like 11/13 of an inch coverable buttons, and they're just a metal base with loops at the back, and then you get a little plastic press mold thing to cover them with. So that went really quickly and nicely, and I'm happy with how they look. And the first 3 that I've sewn on up there look very, very nice. So I'm excited to get the rest of them on. Please excuse the messy backdrop, but I just tried the dress on and then put it on my dress form while I brainstorm what the hat should look like. I'm really happy with how that fitting went. I have so much mobility in this dress, and I really like the way it lays. It isn't the most flattering of dresses, and I'm not thrilled with how the collar turned out, but I really like the dress for what it is, so I'm happy about that. While doing the fitting, I used pins to mark roughly where I wanted all the closure points to go, and then I removed the pins and marked those points with pencil instead. So now I have 5 snaps to sew on 3 buttons and 3 bars. That'll probably take me half an hour because I'm pretty slow, but I can do that on autopilot, and I can do it while watching River Monsters in front of the TV. So I'm going to put this on hold for now and try and figure out the hat while I'm still conscious because I'm so tired. I love to do a really large fun hat, but this dress is supposed to be relatively casual and also not made for the wealthiest woman, so I want to keep the hat kind of conservatively sized. So I'm thinking about doing a hat that slopes downward, and the crown of the hat will be covered with roses and a large silk bow. I'm thinking about basing it on the woman on the right. I really like that style, and I'd love to do something similar to that, just toned down a little bit in forms of decoration, which I realize is quite unusual for me. And that picture is from a Butterick pattern book, which I had the opportunity to look through when I visited McCall's in New York City, which was awesome. So I think I'm going to use that as a main reference and try and draft this out, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. Also, I'm home alone, so I get to listen to Irish music really loudly, and I'm loving it. So that is the pattern sorted. Hopefully it will work. I'm going to go ahead and cut it out of interfacing, and then this afternoon I can sew wire into it and start to see the shape come together. I'm a little bit worried about the proportions of this. It was difficult drafting a base that would be large enough to fit over the hairstyle, but not too large that it would look really bulky once I added the flowers to it. And the same for the brim. I wanted it to be relatively narrow, but there needs to be enough room there for the flowers since they're going to stick out almost 2 inches. and I still want you to be able to see a little bit of the brim along with the contrasting binding that I'm going to use. So it was more of a challenge than I'd expected, but hopefully it will work. It didn't take me that long to draft, so if it fails, then I've only really wasted 20 minutes and half a yard of interfacing, which obviously isn't ideal, but it could be worse. I got all the pieces cut out of interfacing, and I'm pretty happy with how they look. I'm going to try and cut out the top layer of fabric for this as well, which is either white cotton sateen or white cotton muslin. So I have to decide between those two and then get it cut out, and then that's just one more thing I can do downstairs before coming back up here. Hello everyone, so it's the next day now, and I got all the wire sewn into the pieces of my hat last night. And it's really starting to take form, and I'm really happy with these shapes. Since I make my mock-ups for these out of paper, I can't really see the shape come to life until after I've sewn the wire into the interfacing. So when things turn out the right shape and size that I'd hoped they would be, it's so wonderful, and I'm very, very pleased. I also finished the striped Edwardian dress last night. I sewed in all the little hooks and bars. I haven't tried it on yet, but I'm fairly confident it will fit. So I'm really excited about that and very happy about that, and excited to get this hat finished so the entire ensemble is done. That's good, but it means I need to move on to a project I'm less excited about, and I think that's going to be the riding costume. Hopefully I can make some progress on the bodice for that today. I'm also going to work more on the hat. I'm going to cut out the top layer of the fabric and hopefully get that sewed on and the lining sewn in, and maybe I could even do some construction today. So I'm pretty sure I have the bodice cut out for the riding costume. I say I'm pretty sure because it's definitely cut out, but I'm not sure if it's going to work. I based the pattern on the pattern I drafted for the court dress I've been working on, which has all the embroidery and is made from blue velvet. But that dress closed at the back with eyelets, and the bodice was fully boned, and it was just a very different function and construction. And I'm going to try and make this one with just cotton and a layer of suiting, and then I altered the pattern to close at the sides, and I had to add width to it so the sides would overlap, and it's just, I made a lot of changes, and I haven't seen whether or not those changes will work yet. So I think putting this together is going to be a kind of nerve-wracking process until it's finished and hopefully works. I'm going to sew a couple seams and then pin the layers together with the right sides facing each other and sew around them so all the edges are finished when they're turned the right way out. It should be very fast and it should come together pretty quickly. My only concern, as I said, is whether or not it will come together and actually fit. I just tried on the bodice after doing all the machine sewing, and it fits really nicely. The closure points are a little bit far back, so I may struggle getting it on and off on my own, but it fits beautifully, and I did a little test just pinning the skirt on, and I'm so happy with it. In case you were wondering, the skirt is attached to this bodice instead of the jacket, and then the jacket is worn over top of this. So you won't see this bodice at all, it just serves the purpose of holding the skirt up. But I think I'm going to do all the top stitching by hand. As you can tell, these edges aren't like firmly stuck together. So normally you just top stitch around them by machine, but I don't like visible top stitching on historical costumes. So I'm going to do that by hand, and then I'm probably going to sew 3 hooks and bars onto each side. I can do that a little later. I think in the meantime I should focus on another one of my work in progresses, specifically these sleeves on the velvet court dress, because I have not moved forward with that at all and it's almost finished. So I'm going to take a look at them, see if I can figure out what they need to be gathered down to, and then that's yet another task I can add to my list for tonight or later today. Also, I've been listening to the Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat soundtrack, and I love it so much. I pulled out the sleeves that I'd cut out previously for the velvet court gown, and I don't know why I didn't finish them earlier because there really wasn't much to do. All the gathering points were marked. I just had to gather the top edge down and then sew on the cuff, which was also very easy. Though this looks super elaborate, all the embroidery and embellishment work was done on the fabric when I purchased it, so it's just fussy cutting it out in a way that I think looks pleasing. Now all I have to do is do up the side seam and tack the stitching that secures the cuff to the sleeve to the gathered portion of the sleeve so it doesn't interfere with the cuff and make my arm look bigger than it is. I often do this for heavily gathered skirts as well, so that way instead of the bulk being in the waistline, it's just beneath the waistline and causes the skirt to have a bit of volume, and it's just the same process on these sleeves. Then these sleeves can be sewn on, but before doing that I have to sew facings into the bodice, which shouldn't be very difficult, but I didn't cut them out when the bodice was still flat, so it might be slightly challenging. So it's a little bit later in the day now. I've done quite a bit of procrastinating. But I did manage to top stitch all the way around this bodice, and I also sewed in 4 hooks and 4 bars, which will serve as the closure. The other side is going to be sewn shut, but I have to sew the skirt on before doing that. And speaking of sewing the skirt on, that's going to be the next step. I'm going to pin it on and hopefully have enough thread left in my bobbin to get it sewn on as well. And speaking of the skirt, I don't think I filmed very much of the construction process, but I sewed the sides together with French seams. Then I left the top portion of the side seams open and turned the edges inward by hand. Then I used some of the looped cord and outlined the slit and added a little loop at the bottom, which I think looks really pretty and complements the jacket really nicely, since this is the same trim I used to do all of the detail work on it. And I also gathered the back because that's where the most volume is going to be, and it helps shape the skirt. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew it on. I just finished trying on the underdress for the riding costume, and it fits really nicely and is much easier to get into than I'd expected, which is awesome. However, I'm still really unsure about the hem, and the bodice dips down below the riding jacket when it's worn just from the weight of the skirt. So there are some alterations and some planning that's going to need to be done there, and I'm going to wait until tomorrow to do that. So I moved on and covered the hat pieces. I covered them with a layer of batting and then a layer of white cotton sateen, and they're going to be lined with the stripy fabric. Hopefully I can get all of these pieces covered tonight, and if I have extra time left over, then I will cut out the facings for the court gown bodice and get those sewn on and hopefully finish up the sleeves, but I feel like that's a bit of a long shot. Welcome to a new day. I got quite a bit done last night, but not very much done this morning. I had a bunch of hand sewing work to do on the hat that I didn't finish last night, and I couldn't find the Amazon TV remote, so I couldn't watch American Pickers, and I didn't have any TV to binge watch while I sewed, so I wasn't as productive as I would have liked to be. But I'm back to work, and I've cut out the facings for the 1820s court gown bodice, and I sewed one of them on and pinned it, and I think it looks really nice. So I'm going to repeat the process on this side. When I was cutting it out, I forgot to add in seam allowance, which is why the seams are super duper tiny, but there shouldn't be a lot of strain on them, so hopefully they won't unravel. I also cut out bias binding from the silk shanting, which I used to cover buttons on the Edwardian dress, and I'm going to use this to finish the edge of the brim of the hat and add another decorative band on the hat, and I will show you why in just a minute. The exterior of the hat looks like this, which is not ideal. All of those divots are stitches in the top layer of material. The top of this has a layer of quilt batting underneath the cotton sateen because there were bumps visible through the cotton sateen when it's just on its own. So now it has almost a quilted effect, but those stitches have to be there because I did ruched lining, and to secure the ruched lining I need to stitch through both layers of material, and that was the end result. So I'm thinking if I do a 1/2 inch band to finish this edge of the silk shanting, then I could do another one an inch in, and that might add a really neat amount of interest to the hat. It's going to be sort of time consuming to do, but I think it could look really nice and add a lot to the finished thing. I also covered all of the other pieces to the hat. I just haven't lined them yet, so that's going to be a task for tonight, and then I will assemble them tonight as well, though I can't finish the assembly until all the bias binding is sewn onto this. Once the crown portion is on, it just makes it a lot more difficult to work on the brim. So my plan is to try and get this finished today. As I said, I've got the binding cut out, so I just have to sew this together and sew it on. But for now, I'm focusing on the 1920s court dress and getting the facing. Mission accomplished! I got both facings sewn in and pinned in place. So now I'm just going to hand sew about a 1/4 inch away from the arm opening, and then I'm going to pin the raw edge of the facing inward and whip stitch that to the lining. So it'll take a little bit of time, but it should look really nice once it's done. I also did up the side seams for the sleeves, so once I finish sewing the facings in, I can sew them onto the bodice. So that's a good bit of hand sewing work for me to do later. I also sewed all the bias cut strips of shanting together, so now I'm going to pin these onto the hat. The binding is pinned on, now I just have to sew it, and hopefully I won't hit a wire and break a needle and potentially blind myself during that process. Success! I'm going to take an hour or two and do all of the hand sewing work that I just mentioned. So that includes working on the 1820s velvet bodice, in addition to working on this hat and folding this edge under. I want to sew this band on first and see how that goes before attaching and marking the placement for the next band. So this is kind of #1 priority since I want to get the hat finished today. Or at least get the base of the hat finished and then I can trim it tomorrow. It's a new day and I'm back upstairs with my bag of things that I was working on last night while watching TV because I managed to find my Amazon remote, which had somehow fallen into the trash. So there's a first world problem for you. But I'm just going to pull this stuff out and then I'll show you what I got done. So as far as the hat goes, I got the silk binding sewn onto the outer edge, and then I whip stitched to the other side. However, I did not get the second row of silk attached, which I wanted to do, so that's going to be a project for this morning. I also assembled the crown and lined both of the pieces, so now this can be sewn together as soon as I finish sewing on the second layer of binding. I also made some progress on the court bodice and I'm thrilled with how it looks. I think the sleeves add so much to it. I tacked the gathered edge inward and I sewed the facings in and then I sewed the sleeves on, and I think it looks awesome, and I'm kind of hoping to get this costume finished today, which might be too big of a goal, but the skirt is pretty much done. It just needs the back seam done up, and I also have to add a modesty panel, and I have to sew in a few hooks and bars. So it should be doable, but we'll see. If I can't finish this dress in its entirety, then hopefully I'll make a bit of progress on the riding costume. I don't know how much I said about the jacket, or more specifically the collar, but I originally drafted this ridiculous collar pattern and made it out of felt weight interfacing, so it was really stiff and upright. I liked it for about 2 minutes, but then I realized it looked really silly. So I need to rework that. I think I showed the new collar pattern that I drafted, which is much more normal and subtle. So I need to transfer that to paper and do a mock-up of that and hopefully finalize the design so I can finish the jacket. I don't know that I'll be able to finish 3 projects this week, but if I could, that would be absolutely fantastic. That's kind of the best case scenario, but I don't know if I'll get there. In the meantime, I'm going to work on this, and I'm going to pull out the skirt and see if I forgot work that is left to be done on that. And hopefully I'll have some progress to share in a little bit. I just pulled out the skirt and the top portions of the back seam are already turned inward and pinned in place. They just need to be sewn, so that's what I'm going to do right now. I also put the bodice on my dress form to photograph what it looks like with sleeves, and I love it so much. However, I am debating about removing the gold trim around the neckline because I don't think it quite matches, but I also really like how it looks, so I'm conflicted about that. I got the back seam of the skirt sewn up and it went pretty nicely. And then I sewed it onto the bodice, and I'm leaving the waistline unfinished, which is probably an unpopular choice, but this velvet/velveteen doesn't fray that much, and that means that I could always adjust the length later on, which would be especially helpful if I ever sold it. Now I'm just going to go ahead and sew hooks and bars into the waistline and snaps into the slit to keep it closed. I'm really annoyed. I'm all out of this size snap, or rather I have one left, so I have to use these really crappy ones I got in the garment district, and they do not hold very well at all, but this is a low stress area, so hopefully it won't matter. But that reminds me, if you have any sellers you use for buying small snaps or small hooks and bars in bulk, that would be awesome. I've seen some on eBay, but their sizes are different than the sizes I would buy in store, and they don't have like the measurements in millimeters anywhere. For reference, I use size 1 and size 2 hooks and bars, and then I like using size 3/0 and size 4/0 in snaps. So any recommendations on where to get those in larger quantities for less money than they charge at Joann's would be great. It's finished! I got all these snaps and hooks and bars sewn on, and though I haven't done a final fitting, I'm relatively confident it will fit. The last one looked very promising, so I'm really pleased with this, and it's actually a little bit more flattering than I'd expected it to be. Of course, I love the material and the embroidery and the sequins. It's just a beautiful fabric, and it wasn't nearly as difficult to work with as I'd expected. I do want to figure out a headpiece to wear with this, though I'm debating about just using a headband and some fake flowers. And also shoes. I actually started a pair of shoes to go with this, like just a pair of homemade slippers, and I think I might dig those out and see what they look like and see if I can move forward with them. Hopefully I can make them work, but I'm not super confident. I also marked the placement for the bias tape on the brim of the hat, and then I pinned it in place, and I'm really happy with how it looks, and I'm going to go ahead and sew this on this afternoon. Here are the shoe remnants. They actually look fairly promising. I just held them up to my feet, and I think they'll fit relatively nicely, but I can't find the soles for them, and I'm pretty sure that I cut the soles out of leather, but they're not in the bag with all of the other stuff. So I need to search around for those or potentially cut out new ones and there's going to be quite a bit of figuring out machine sewing that has to happen before I can work more on these downstairs. You know I'm serious because I have a list, and it's a very long list for me, considering it's relatively late in the day. It's almost 12 o'clock. I spent this morning writing blog posts because I was behind on those, and I find I'm a lot more alert mid-morning than I am late afternoon, which is when I usually try and write them. So I thought I would just get them out of the way early on, but now it means that I have this massive list of things to do before it gets too sunny to work in here. So in this room I do have blinds that can pull down, which means I can work a little bit later into the day. Some of these things, like photographing my material for a haul video, needs to be done while the lighting on my desk is still nice. I also want to finish the hat and take photos of my court dress and Edwardian dress on the dress form. It'd be nice to get this video edited, and then I want to evaluate my riding coat dress. I'd also like to transfer the collar to paper, though I don't think I'll get around to making it today. And I want to evaluate the slippers that I showed in the last clip and see if I can progress with those. So that's the plan for today, but I'm going to start off with trimming the hat. As you can see, it's all sewn together and it's all nicely lined. I think I actually prefer the lining to the exterior, so I'm going to do my best to fix that with the addition of a large silk bow and some fake flowers. So I just finished trimming the hat. Does anyone remember a couple days ago when I said that I wanted the decorations to be subtle and simple to match the dress? I was totally lying because I went absolutely crazy with this, but I love how it looks. I added like a whole bush of flowers. I'm not even kidding. There were so many. And I also used this cool Sprig that I got at Joanne's a couple years ago that had fake ivy and ferns and just a lot of texture to it that you wouldn't usually see in fake flowers. And then I added a feather to the back. I like being kind of unique with my feather placement. I think it looks better when it's draped over the hat rather than sticking out of it. And then I cut the feather and used what was left on this side just to balance it out. The way it is now, you see the feathers in silhouette and you have a little bit of movement with the feathers, but they aren't front and center. The focus is definitely on the shape of the brim and all of the flowers, which I love. My one regret is that I used quite a few yellow flowers in this, and I think I should have just stuck to pink, but I didn't have very many small pink flowers, so some sacrifices had to be made. Now I have to clean this up, and then I'm going to photograph all of my fabric for a haul video and a blog post. Also, I think I spent an equal amount of time dancing around in the hat as I did actually putting stuff on it, but now it's time for it to go away so I can clean up. Or I could wear it while I clean. So I got quite a bit done. I managed to finish the hat, which I showed you, and then I photographed and filmed little clips of all the fabric I got for my birthday. I also photographed the court gown in the Edwardian project on a dress form. Now I'm going to take a break and get some food and let the dogs out and try and finish up a blog post, potentially write an entirely new one, maybe edit the vlog and also take care of some emails, and then I can come back up and evaluate the slippers and the riding costume later today. But before I go, look at how nice this all looks together. I love how it turned out, and the hat really complements it so well. I can't wait to wear it and get photos of it. I'm thinking about buying a pair of white Edwardian style shoes to go with it, but I'm not sure if it's worth the investment, so we'll see. But I am very tempted. Hello everyone, so it's the next day. I know I said I was going to work on stuff last night, but I ended up working on a puzzle instead because I'm an expert at procrastinating. Though I did manage to get a couple blog posts done as well as editing what I'd filmed of this video so far, which was good. This morning I've been working on the shoes, or attempting to work on the shoes. They're just not working, so I think I'm going to scrap this idea. I don't know what shoes I'm going to wear the dress with because they are kind of visible when the dress is worn, so it's still a little short in the front. But these just aren't looking good. The tops are canvas, cotton, and then the velvet. Then the bottoms are leather with a slight interfacing frame. This wasn't part of the original plan, it just really needed something to help it keep its shape. But the back portion of it really does not fit and it gapes away from my foot. And it just looks bad. If you compare it to this shoe, which is like a real shoe, it curves inwards at the top to cup the foot. And this fabric just doesn't have the stiffness to do that, even though it is patterned very similarly to this. So I think it's just time to call it quits. I don't see this working in a way that I'm happy with, so I don't really feel like moving forward with it. Instead, I'm going to work on the riding costume and see how that goes. Now I need to lift the waistline slightly so the bodice isn't visible underneath the riding jacket. I also have to work on the collar and figure out the hem. So once I figure out exactly how I'm going to accomplish all of those things, I will be back. I just did a fitting with this, and I think I managed to fix the length problem. I just have to take the bodice up at this portion by about an inch, so I'm debating between taking the skirt off and then sewing it on higher, or just sewing across where it pinned pretty much. I'm happy that I managed to fix that, but I forgot there were pins in it when I tried it on, so while I was doing it up, I managed to scrape up my finger. Not as bad as you could do with anything other than a pin, but it's quite uncomfortable and it's bleeding a bit, so I think I'm going to take a break and let the dogs out. I realize it doesn't seem like I've worked very much today, but I spent well over an hour and a half on the shoes that ended up failing, so I have put in quite a bit of time already today. And though I do have to take this in, the next step is then going to be figuring out the hem, and I don't have access to a full-length mirror right now, so I think I'm going to wait until my dad wakes up and then I can borrow the one that's in his room. So it's much later in the day now, but I finally got around to making the alterations in the bodice for the riding costume, and then I did a fitting and figured out the length of the hem that I want. As you can see, I'm taking off quite a lot of fabric. I've decided to make it more of a walking length, but I'm going to leave room in the hem so we could make it longer in the future. I just think that's what's going to look best in the photos. So I pinned the hem, then I tried it on, made sure I liked it, and now I'm just marking the hemline with chalk, and I'm going to measure 3 or 4 inches away from this line and cut the skirt there, and then I'm going to transfer those markings onto the other half of the skirt and trim it all, which is the exact same process I did on the Edwardian skirt earlier in the week, except this time I'm using chalk, which rubs off, instead of pencil, which is permanent. So I learned my lesson there. I just got the hem trimmed. It was really difficult to lay this skirt out evenly because I didn't have the center front or the center back marked, and there are seams at the center front or center back to line up. So I was completely dependent on the side seams and just arranged things until I thought they looked right. So hopefully it won't be uneven. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn the bottom edge inward by a ½ inch and baste it down. Then I'm going to turn it in at the chalk marking and pin it down and sew it down properly. Probably with whip stitches because I think that will be fastest. So I have the hem pinned and I'm going to go downstairs and sew this. I think I have an episode of RuPaul's Drag Race recorded, so that'll be what I spend the next 42 minutes doing. I also finally transferred the collar that I draped for the riding jacket onto newsprint and added seam allowances and all that stuff, so I can make the mock-up for that tomorrow and hopefully get the jacket finished tomorrow as well. But this is the last day that I'm officially filming for this video, so I think the next clip you're going to see is probably a wrap-up with some photos of all the things I finished and my thoughts on everything that I've finished and done this week. So I hope you enjoy that, and that's it from me for now.
So that's it. As I said in the beginning, when I looked back through this video, I wasn't as thrilled by my progress as I was in the moment. Since 2 of the projects were already almost finished, it doesn't feel as satisfying to have actually finished them. But they're both at a point where I tend to get really stuck, which is where they're almost done, but there are a few hurdles you have to jump over to actually finish them. That's when I tend to abandon projects because the fun part is over with and I just want to move on to something new. I found the riding costume especially frustrating because I couldn't make it historically accurate and also have it look good in photos. And the more I work on it, the less I like the materials that I picked for it. I feel like it looks quite inexpensive, especially compared to the extant garment that inspired me. So I'm still not thrilled with how that's coming out, but I'm glad that I'm taking steps towards finishing it. As you saw, I made the bodice and the skirt to go underneath it. I also sewed sleeves onto the jacket and then altered the cuffs of the sleeves, which I don't think I filmed, but I had to do because the cuffs would not fit over my hands and the sleeves were just basted in place, which I didn't realize when I started the video. For the court gown, I sewed the skirt on and I added closures to the skirt and I figured out the sleeves and sewed the sleeves on. Unfortunately, the shoes to go with that dress did not work out, but the dress looks very pretty and I'm very happy with it. I'm also absolutely thrilled with the Edwardian costume I worked on. I think it turned out really nicely. It's very different from anything I've done before, but it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. I love how light it is and how much movement I have in it. It's just a really fun, nice dress to wear. And of course, I absolutely adore the hat. I have it sitting right over there and I cannot tell you how much I want to put it on and just wear it. There's just something about hats that make me smile and this one is no exception. On top of sewing progress, I also managed to get 4 blog posts written and edited, which is more than I've done this year, so to get that done in a week is a big achievement for me. And of course I managed to get this video filmed and edited, which hasn't happened in a while. Some things that I didn't get to that I wanted to include the 17th century orange brocade dress, which I already have a blog post about, but it has a few finishing touches that need to be made, and unfortunately I didn't get around to them this week. I also didn't work at all on the 1820s pink and white dress, which I wanted to improve upon. So that's kind of disappointing, but there's always time for it next week. And I think that's it for this video, but as per usual, there will be tons of extra information in the description box, along with links to everything that I mentioned in this video. So if you want to learn more, you should definitely check that out. And as I said earlier in the video, if you want more frequent updates from me, then you should check out my blog and Instagram, because I'm much better at updating those than I am updating this channel. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed, and I shall talk to all of you very soon. Or at least sooner than 2 months.